All right, so I brought up in one of my last videos, I was talking about the Randal Rauser T-Jump Matt Dillahunty debate. And somebody asked, why do you always say, I don't know if the person was being playful or for real, but he said something like, you always say, so I watched 20 minutes of this debate, and you never seem to go back to the debates and analyze them. Now, the debates themselves are not really the point. That's why oftentimes I'll bring up the debate once, and usually, very rarely will I bring it up a few times. Why? Because the debates themselves are not really the point. That particular debate, the topic, the reason why I'm watching the debate is because the topic is relevant to something I'm doing on my channel. So the debate itself, I'm usually using as a jumping off point to start talking about something. Now, in that particular debate, I did watch the whole thing. And it went off the rails, and it's not completely worth your time necessarily. From the Christian point of view, they were trying to bring an argument that I think actually could be really successful and presented correctly, could be game-changing, and really importantly successful for the Christian community. But their particular version of it wasn't strong enough. So for me to belabor the point and analyze all 2 hours of debate isn't really necessarily worth my time or worth your time. I watched the whole debate. It's just not all of the debate is worth talking about. The strongest part of the debate and the strongest part of what they were trying to present is what's worth talking about. And the idea on the table, what was actually under discussion in that debate, is Christianity rational? Now, if you present the argument from religious experience, which is what they were trying to present in that debate, or another way of saying it is the inner witness of the Holy Spirit, or having an experience of religion that we call self-authenticating, is how I've heard it said. You present that correctly, and the idea, is it rational to believe that, answers itself. It's obvious and it's a no-brainer. Of course it's rational. Is it, you experience something directly, is it rational to believe your own experience? Of course it is. It's the most eminently reasonable thing you can do. And why it's a no-brainer is because it's how I actually became a Christian. On the night in question, I went to a church and had an experience produced by the people in that church and some guy they invited there, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, this really does seem like God. So I was almost completely convinced that night by the experience. And why? Because it felt really honest to God in the moment. I was like, hey, wait a minute. This really does feel like God. To rule an experience that you have not had as outside of the realm of possibilities, Craig, why? Because I have an experience, is actually far less rational or reasonable of a position. That can't possibly be, Craig. Why? Because I've never experienced it. So if you frame that argument correctly, the question answers itself. Is it rational to believe what you experienced directly? Could be another way of saying it. And if you ask it right, the question answers itself and is obvious, and it's a no-brainer. So he used in that particular debate 2 examples. And I wondered at the time why he used those examples, because they weren't very strong. They have flaws in them. The first example he used was from the movie Contact. Now, Matt Dillahunty jokingly says, well, it's interesting that you should use fiction. But he said that facetiously, but actually that's a really important point. It's not a good idea. 1, to use fiction, and 2, more importantly, use science fiction. Why? Because science fiction, the rules don't necessarily apply. So it's not analogous to how things operate in the real world. You can bend the rules as you see fit. That's the whole point of sci-fi. So you can't really use it as a good example. This is how religious, even if you're using it as an analogy, it's got a problem there. Why? Because it's science fiction. I think he used the movie Contact. And from my understanding, it's a classic film. That's what gynecologist told me. It's a classic film. Originally, I thought he meant Cocoon. I was thinking, when he said Contact, the whole time I was thinking Cocoon. Cocoon is a classic. But I didn't see how it fit. It was, if I remember correctly, Cocoon, they're like old guys in an old age home, and they're pods in the swimming pool that are aliens, and they somehow become a fountain of youth for the old people. It's really fun. It's a really good movie. Actually, it was very successful, like 88 or something. But he was talking about the movie Contact, which I don't think I've ever seen, but apparently it's a first-rate sci-fi film. But again, the problem is you can't really use sci-fi when talking about religious experiences. Why? Because the normal rules of reality don't apply in science fiction. It's like trying to say, no, like remember when the Terminator came back and now he killed Linda Hamilton's son, therefore he can't lead the army in the future. Okay, you're talking about sci-fi. Even if you're using it as a hypothetical, it's still got a problem there. Why? Because the normal rules of reality don't apply, so it's not a good example. The other example he used had a problem too. He was trying to discuss an experience that is self-authenticating, wherein I have the experience and I don't need evidence. It's what I've been trying to tell you. If I have an experience, that's providing its own evidence to me, the person experiencing it. To say, give me the evidence, is a fallacious line of reasoning. Or to say, I don't believe you, I don't believe that experience is possible, is not logical either. To say, I don't necessarily believe that that experience is God. Why? Because I haven't experienced it myself. That's reasonable. But most atheists go to a different place. Say, I don't believe that experience is possible. Why? Because I haven't experienced it. Therefore, it can't be. So, the other example that he used in the debate, again, not the strongest example. How you're alone in the woods somewhere in a cabin and somebody thinks you committed a crime. T-Jump easily figured out a defeater for that. Now, why he used those two particular examples is because he borrowed them directly from William Lane Craig. And why I'm not going to bother, going into depth with the actual debate, because there are stronger examples out there that I can think of to underscore the argument better. And once I think of the stronger example, you will listen to the example and go, oh, okay, that's a no-brainer. Yeah, it's really obvious. So think of what is actually being discussed and what is actually under dispute. Most of the time, these debates go off the rails in ways that aren't relevant or aren't worth talking about. Often. There's usually only a few parts of the debate that are actually really important to what I do, and those are the parts I talk about. So the rest of the debate I throw out as if it didn't really happen. Why? Because it's not really that important. Not interested in dumpster fires and, personality clashes necessarily, unless it's entertaining. So, for example, Godless Girl versus T-Jump, that debate took place last week. I may do a analysis of that debate. Why? Because it's really entertaining. It was total dumpster fire. I don't think I watched the whole thing with Dad either. Time is limited. I watched about an hour of it and got the point. The point is it's really fun to watch. If you're looking for a dumpster fire debate, T-Jump tries to drive her crazy for an hour. Eventually she has spaz attacks. Make an argument! Are you going to make an argument? Make an effing argument! It's awesome. If you're looking for a dumpster fire, first rate. I may make a video on it just for entertainment's sake. But is it worth watching if you're really interested in arguments about religious experience or, apologetics? No, not necessarily. It's only worth watching if you're looking for a chuckle for an hour. This particular debate, there's only parts of it that are worth watching, so I wouldn't even necessarily recommend you watch the whole thing. I would recommend you do what I do, which is go back and look at the William Lane Craig self-authenticating of the Holy Spirit, and then you find out why Randal Rauser used those two examples, why he borrowed them directly from William Lane Craig. Now, they're weak examples. Why I watch the debate is because that underlying argument is really important to me. It's not the debate itself. Those are weak examples. So let's think of a better example to underscore the point. And you tell me, is it rational to believe this? The real question is it rational to believe what you actually experience directly? Of course it is. Even if your society and everyone around you tells you you're crazy for experiencing it, yeah, even then. If all things being equal, if you've done some, checking of yourself, are you drunk when it happens? Are you high? No, then you opt with the plausible over yourself. Other than that, you opt with yourself. So let's take two examples of better analogies. You'll understand exactly what I mean. And everyone will agree with me. Why? Because I tell you the God's honest truth. So let's say you work for a boss. And everybody around you says, this guy is the most wonderful boss on the face of this earth. And you're working for him, and as far as you can tell, the whole time you work there, when you're with other people, he comes in and they're like, oh, he's such a wonderful human being. And he's polite to everyone and really nice. And he's like, he comes in with chocolates for the whole company, and first thing in the morning, he comes in and makes the coffee for everybody. He's really nice and respectful. And, so as far as you're concerned, as far as all the evidence that's presented to you, your boss is a wonderful human being, and that's all anybody ever says about him or thinks about him. Now one day, you and him are somewhere alone. And nobody else is around, there's no cameras around. And you see with his own eyes, some 7-year-old kid comes in who's handicapped. Yeah, let's make it really obvious. And the handicapped kid, like you're at a store, and the handicapped kid goes, do you have this in green, sir? And he starts going, do you have this in green, sir? Freaking retard. What? And you're like, wait, what are you doing, dude? It's like, shut up. I'm running this show. Listen, you little moron. When you talk to me, you talk respectfully. The kid starts crying. He's like, oh, boo-hoo-hoo. You going to cry now, you little baby? You little girl, you little baby, you little girl? Get out of my store, you little biatch. All of a sudden, you have direct evidence, and you saw it yourself, that this guy's a douchebag. What happens to your opinion of that guy from that day forward? It forever changes. Why? Because you cannot invalidate your own experience. What you saw with your own eyes, assuming everything was normal, it was a normal day. And you go, wait, why'd you do that, dude? And he goes, you ever tell anybody I did that? I'll kill you. I'll kill you and your entire family. And you're like, wait a minute, something's off. This guy's different than everybody thinks he is. Now, you tell your friend, no, you got to trust me, he's evil. And your friend's like, I don't buy it. Why? Because nobody else thinks he's evil, everybody knows he's a great guy. And you say, but you didn't see what I saw. What's your friend going to say? Depends on what your friend thinks of your credibility. What's your friend going to say? You're right, he is evil. If you tell him the story, if your friend trusts you, he'll go, oh, wow, there is a different side to that guy. If your friend doesn't trust you, he'll go, maybe you just imagine it. Maybe you were overtired that day. Maybe you're spinning in a different way. The point is you, not how everybody else hears your data or information. The point is, how do you rationally process what you actually experienced? And 99 times out of 100, if you're a normal, rational, fully functioning human being and you're reasonable, there is no reason on earth why you would doubt your direct experience of something over everybody else's opinions or over what the conventional wisdom is. You should go with yourself. Why? Because you saw him do it with your own eyes. Now you got evidence that nobody else is privy to. And to further the analogy to a religious experience, some people might not want to hear it. Some people might not buy it. No, you don't understand. This guy's a douchebag. I saw him be really, really mean to this kid. Now you got an atheist about this guy. Boss, I'm skeptical, Craig. Why? Because you're probably making it up. You're probably distorting it. I'm skeptical, Craig. That's more analogous to what we're talking about. Something that we, the religious people, experience that you, the atheist or the non-believer, don't experience. Perfectly within your purview, your prerogative to be skeptical. Would you take somebody's word for it that the boss was a douchebag based on their one experience of that boss that you hadn't seen that side of him ever? No. But would you accept it as evidence and start checking yourself? You should. Why? Could that be more reasonable? But again, it all depends on how credible you think the guy who tells you the boss is a douchebag is. So let's use another example. Further the case. Let's say that there is something in the world, there's some sort of phenomenon known as the singing rock. There are 30% of the population insists that when you walk past a certain type of rock, the rocks sing. Yeah, 30% of the population insists that this phenomenon is actually occurring. The other 70% of the population don't experience it directly. You've never experienced it directly. So where do you stand on it? You're skeptical. I'm skeptical. I come up to you and say, or somebody says to you, the rocks sing, I promise you. I walked past that rock yesterday. And sure enough, the rock was saying, ooh-wee, ride me high. Tomorrow's a day that my brides are gonna come. Ooh-wee, we gotta fly down into the easy chair. Yes, it's a Bob Dylan song. Gang is gone and his brother Don could not keep on keeping on. Cross that bridge after it's gone. You ain't going nowhere. So, that guy insists that the rock was singing. You haven't heard it. You're skeptical, correct? 70% of the population insists the rocks don't sing. Why? Because they have never experienced it. To further the analogy, maybe there's some people raising money off the phenomena who haven't experienced it themselves. Maybe there are poser rock singers out there, guys who haven't heard it either, but are pretending they have. Because I'm sure there are people out there laying claim to religious experiences who haven't really experienced. Why? Don't know. But they're out there, maybe to make money. Maybe there's a whole cottage industry of rock singing, guys on TV raising money off of the singing rocks who haven't really heard the singing rocks. But here's the relevant information. You yourself are skeptical that the rocks sing, correct? Why? Because you haven't heard it. So you're skeptical that the phenomena exists as being reported, correct? Okay, that's eminently reasonable. Now you walk past a rock one day, and sure enough, as sure as the sun is rising, you hear it yourself. Well, I've been down so goddamn long that it looks like up for me. Yeah, the Rock's singing its blues. I don't know, it's tough out there for the Rocks. Well, I've been down so very damn long that it looks like up for me. It's hard out there for a rock. What do you want from me? Sing the blues, Craig. Yeah, well, you try sitting around all day. Nothing to do. Gets boring, so they're singing the blues. What else would you expect? You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. No, they're singing the blues. Why? Because it's hard out there for a rock. The point is, you hear it yourself. Now where do you stand on whether rocks can sing or not? Pretty obviously you 100% go into the camp of, I believe in the singing rock. Why? Because you heard it yourself. Now, you might be skeptical of your own ears. That's fine. Maybe, up to a point, that's acceptable. But that's really not true. If you heard it yourself, all things being equal, you do a check. Am I stoned right now? Am I high? Am I drunk? Am I insane? You go home and ask your wife. As I said in the last video, I think I said, don't ask your wife. Or at least if you're me, don't ask your wife. I said, yeah, you're totally crazy, Greg. Yes, you're absolutely stark raving mad. No, nobody should believe you at all. Point is, you hear it again. The next day, you go past the rock. Same thing. The old get old and Craig Reed just gets stronger. May take a week and it may take longer. I got the gun soon, I'll have the numbers. Gonna win, yeah, I'm taking over. Yeah, the Rocks are singing in favor of my YouTube channel. Imagine that. So the Rocks are singing again. You hear it with your own ears. Where do you stand on the singing rocks? Are you still skeptical? Of course not. Not if you're honest. Of course not. Is it rational for you to believe in the singing rock past that point? It's 100% reasonable. Why? You heard it yourself. You are now going to be firmly and committed in the camp of the singing rock believers, period. Nothing, and if it's a powerful enough experience, you're not going to be dissuadable. Why? Because you heard it yourself. Doesn't matter how technically implausible that idea is. Someone starts going, well, give me the evidence that rocks can sing. You would think the whole question was what are they trying to hide by even framing it that way? I heard it myself. You'd start to see through people who ask you questions immediately as someone who available to the information and who isn't. It's a good analogy. So is the douchebag boss a good analogy. You saw your boss acting like a douchebag with your own eyes. Nobody else was around you. Do you believe yourself? Yeah. Do you believe the evidence of what you saw and experienced directly? Of course you do. Of course you do. Now there may be caveats and disqualifiers on how much you actually believe your own experience, but I can hear the atheist cooking them up right now, but those are fallacious. Why? Think of only thing I'm trying to point out. Is it rational to believe what you directly experience? Yes. Are you going to side with yourself 100 times out of 100? Yes. If you experience something directly and you're really truly convinced that you experienced it directly, are you in the camp of believing your own experience? Yes. Do you require evidence to convince yourself of what you really think you saw? No. That is the evidence right there. You experience it directly. The only way to know for sure if religiotards are onto something real is to try to have the experience for yourself, is to try to evidence the experience for yourself. That's the only way. That's the only path of knowledge production if you're an atheist listening to this. Outside of that, you are trying to debunk, dismiss, discredit something that you have not directly experienced. Is it possible the rocks sing? Yes. Go listen. Is it possible the boss is a douchebag? Yes. Poke around a little. Investigate. But if you rule it out of the realm of possibilities because you yourself haven't experienced it, that's not necessarily the most reasonable position. Now, most atheists don't say they're in that position. They say they're skeptical. Skeptical is totally fine. I have not one iota of a problem with skeptics. But you have to be an honest skeptic and process the information carefully and correctly. And that puts most people who are atheists listening to me in a small minority. 20%, 25% of the atheists. As I try to point out, there's a huge chunk of the atheists out there who are in the business of disproving what they have not experienced, which is a totally unreasonable position. I haven't experienced, therefore I'm going to prove it wrong with every ounce of my strength. Debunk, dismiss, discredit. That's the only thing I want to do. Okay, that's not an honest position, despite the fact that it's so supported in the atheist community. It's not honest handling. It's not honest information processing. It's not even close. It's I rule it out of the realm of possibilities because I have not directly experienced it myself. That's usually what's going on, guys. It's usually what's going on, guys. That's not a rational position. I haven't experienced it, Craig. Okay, good. I get that. Therefore, it's not possible to experience. That doesn't logically follow. Do you see the issue? If you actually experience something, you are now firmly in the camp, like it or not, of I honestly believe that this is possible and it occurred. Why? Because you experienced it directly. The issue is most of you don't have enough trust in Christians or religious people to take their testimony for real. Why? Because a lot of them are not credible. And they've been in the business of undermining their own credibility for a while now. But that doesn't mean that the phenomena itself is ruled out of the realm of possibilities. Because most Christians describing the phenomenon, A, either haven't really had it, B, had small versions of it that aren't really convincing one way or the other, or C, aren't necessarily to be trusted. Once you understand this properly, most of the stuff that's being discussed in these debates is totally and completely and 100% irrelevant. Totally and completely and 100% irrelevant. You can't possibly experience what you say you experience, Craig. Why? Because the Old Testament has negative scriptures. Okay, how's that relevant? It's not. You can't possibly be experiencing something in your prayer closet as you report, Craig. Why not? Because the Old Testament endorses slavery. Oh, okay, how's that relevant? It's not. You see the point? I just covered 60% of the counter-apologetics. Swear to God, I just knocked off 60% of the counter-apologetics. Why? Because those are the two most biggest cottage industries out there. The Old Testament is violent scriptures and, the Old Testament endorses slavery. Both of which are completely irrelevant to the phenomena I'm reporting. Completely and utterly irrelevant. You can't possibly be experiencing the phenomena you report experiencing, Craig. Why? Because if God were good, there wouldn't be evil in the world. Now I got 80%. You see my point? Now it's 80%, at least. Maybe I'm overrating how much those three arguments make up the bulk of counter-apologetics, but those are a pretty big chunk of them, guys. And they're almost completely irrelevant to what I'm actually reporting in the prayer closet, to the phenomena being reported. If you were to experience the phenomena for yourself directly, guess what? You believe it. Why? It's pretty darn convincing, that's why. Pretty darn convincing. But it's not something that just sort of magically occurs to a human being. You've got to actively seek it out. God is hidden, Craig. You've got to start looking, and you've got to start looking in a way that you can actually find. Period. Non-negotiable. That's non-negotiable. And partially a religious experience is partially subjective, which means it's up to you to some degree. is a science to it. There's a path of cultivation that is non-negotiable, wherein you want to know if this actually produces God belief in you, you've got to cultivate it. Actively participate in it and actively cultivate it and learn to turn up the heat for yourself. All of which is knowable and doable. And in the months to come, I'm going to have, avenues for people to do just that. Evidence the experience for themselves. Then you can decide for yourself. No, Craig's full of garbage. Those rocks don't sing. He's crazy. He's a lunatic. Fine, your prerogative. Only thing being disputed by that particular debate is it rational? It's totally rational to believe what you actually experienced. It's 100% how your beliefs are formed. And if you don't trust yourself, that's, I don't know what to tell you. Something wrong. Because you should be able to trust yourself. You should be able to trust yourself to the point where you side with yourself and what you directly experience over defeaters. You got to check the agenda of the person presenting the defeater. So your boss, you now think the boss is a douchebag. You're pretty sure. Why? Because you saw him act like a total evil creep with your own eyes. You experienced it directly. Are you pretty sure that he's got a dark side that's pretty scary? Yeah. Why? Because you experienced it yourself. Now there's a Pine Creek Doug for your boss. He tries to interview you about your boss. And he tries to defeat your knowledge of how much of a creep your boss is. Do you see how irrational the take is? The only possible honest thing, if you haven't seen what the boss did, and I'm laying claims to something that is outside your realm of experience, is to listen to me and decide if I'm credible. You can't defeat me. You either listen to me and decide he's credible or he's cray-cray. That's fair. But to try to defeat me based on something that you yourself have not experienced is illogical. You want to Pine Creek Doug me. That's, gaslight me into not giving you the clear, why do you think your boss is a douchebag, Craig? Well, you didn't see what he did to this kid. This kid was handicapped, Doug. How do we know the kid was handicapped? Did we see him? You see what I'm talking about? That's how most atheists would roll. How do you know your boss really did that, Craig? You want to actually know the truth about the boss? You got to listen to the person making the objection and listen to what they actually say. And yeah, you could do a reading on them, decide if they're a credible human being. You decide I'm not credible, I'm not worth listening to, that's your prerogative, that's your choice. But for me to believe myself is eminently rational. Why? I saw him act like a douchebag with my own eyes. I know what I saw. And for you to listen to me is the only rational means of exploration to know if I'm telling the truth. Give me a fair hearing, listen to what I have to say. That's it. To try to defeat me is inane. Why? Because you didn't see it. You can't defeat me based on, it's outside of your experience of the boss. Fine. That's exactly why it's new information. You can't defeat new information. You have to give it a fair hearing, listen to it and process it. And then maybe you can decide from a perspective of a rational point of view, okay, I don't think this fully comports with reality. Why? Because Craig is crazy, crazy, crazy train. Guy makes no sense. He's singing rocks. Last video he was singing in the Navy. Totally out of his mind. That's obvious. That's fine. That's fair. But in order to do that, you have to you have to listen to the information and process it rationally and fully and completely. So if you're doing an honest assessment of the character of the boss, someone's got that counter argument about the boss's character based on his own experience. There's no way you can rule that out of the realm of evidence or realm of possibilities. You have to either listen to him or be dishonest. And then weigh it against what you know about other things. But you still have to give it a fair hearing. What atheists are trying to do is shut down that voice. Say that voice cannot be. Why? Because I haven't heard it. Same thing they're trying to do with the singing rocks. The rocks can't be singing, Craig. Why? Because I didn't hear it. Doesn't work like that. Never will. You can still be an atheist, but you have to be an atheist after an honest avenue of exploration, wherein you take the strongest possible arguments for the experience being reported, the strongest ones, not the middle ones, not the weakest ones, the strongest possible ones, and you rationally assess them. After steel manning them, not straw manning them. not trying to defeat them. Why? Because it's easy to find defeaters for anything under the sun if you're looking for them. As I explained, that's not really giving it a fair hearing. That's you deciding ahead of time that it's false. You have to steelman it. You have to be trying to reinforce it. If you're not already doing that, you already should have been. Why? Because that's the only way you find out if it's true. Outside of that, you are just reinforcing your own confirmation bias 100 times out of 100. That's all you're doing. You aren't conversing, you aren't debating, you aren't dialoguing, you have decided on something ahead of time. And you are spending your time reinforcing it. And trying to back it up because that's what your friends do. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Your friends don't know that your boss is a douchebag. Why? Because they're busy pimping out how great he is and not listening to the person who's giving them contrary information. That's more akin to what I see going on here. That's more analogous. And no, the actual debating question, total waste of time. Why? Because the examples being used were too weak and too easily debunked, dismissed, discredited. And if these particular examples that I stumbled on in this particular video aren't strong enough, doesn't matter. Why? Because tomorrow's coming and I'll get stronger ones. You cannot rule out of the realm of possibility something that you have not directly experienced it just because you haven't directly experienced it. That is fallacious reasoning. That's not reasonable. Period. And if I didn't quite nail it down in this video, a video's coming where I will. Why? Because that's just a fact. Someone reports something that doesn't comport to your worldview. Okay? You cannot automatically rule it out of the realm of possibility. You can't. Why? Because that is not honest investigation. That is you reinforcing your own confirmation bias. No matter how you spin it to yourself, that's what you're doing. Period. Doesn't matter how you spin it to yourself. So, if I didn't quite nail it down in this video, it doesn't really matter. Why? Because get ready. Get ready for other videos to come. This is an irrefutable argument. It's completely and 100% rational to believe what you directly experience. It's how you form your beliefs. If you can't trust yourself, shut the video down, go do something else, and, I don't know, lock yourself up right now, because you can't be trusted. How you formulate almost all of your truly core beliefs is something inside of you experiences directly. It's what I've been trying to talk about. The logical predicate is not the most important thing. It's the emotional resonance. That's the whole ball game. That's the whole ball game. The emotional resonance. So, anyways, I'll stop while I'm ahead. Oh, quit while I'm ahead. You're not ahead, Greg. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I'm ahead. I'm winning 30-0. 30-3. So, anyways, just reinforce what I was talking about in one of my last videos. So, yeah, a little long-winded, a little ranty, but again, I was on to some important things. So, there you have it, kids. Mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.